Alright, ladies and gentlemen, time for another video. So, I've been noticing that the build series for the Talon has not been getting quite as many views as maybe I hoped, and I think that's just because the pacing. They say you should make content that you would want to watch, and to be honest, the videos I've been making for the Talon, I probably wouldn't be watching. I'll just say that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make less of them and more spread out, and we're going to put more stuff into every video. So let's get started today with our progress report for this video. So we completed the rear axle. So this is the parts you saw me make in the previous videos here and here, all welded up. We put it on a jig, of course, to try and minimize the warping, and then made this plate back here for a shock. There it is in all its glory. Then Dad made these cool little isolator things, shock mounts, that go into those holes. He made those completely from scratch. From a bar stock. Pretty neat little job there. And then we made a aluminum track locator. That's what this mount here is for. That is for the track locator, and then there will be an accompanying mount on the driver's side front, or passenger side front of the 4-link mount. So there it is, all mounted up. You can see there's our track locator. That is aluminum, very common on sprint car stuff. It is a parallel 4-link. Basically, we were going for make it as light as humanly possible. You can also see some of the previous owners' work here. A lot of this is like stainless steel, and it's like 60 gauge or 060. So it's like super heavy stuff. I think this is the stainless steel here. So yeah, you can see there's the axle all mounted up, and then we used a rear shock and spring from a Mazda Miata. So at the end of this project, I'm going to list out all the cars that we took parts from, just because I think it's going to be interesting. So this was our first glimpse of what the car looked like on the ground. Turning out pretty cool, if you ask me. The only thing that I kind of don't like is the rear wheel is kind of inset a lot. But when we put some autocross tires on it, it should improve the look a little bit, because we do plan to autocross it briefly. So there it is. While it was on the ground and on 4 wheels for the first time in a long time, we broke out the scales, of course, and the total weight was 1,859 pounds with me in it. So car's pretty dang light. Oh, other interesting thing there is, notice the rear percentage, 24.3% rear. So that means 75.7 front. That's what you want. I mean, if you notice here, the entire engine is like forward of the axle center line. So that's what you want in a front wheel drive car, or so we've heard. Next, I'm going to show you the video of us cutting the roof off. So before we did that, we made these little tabs that kind of located the roof, and so that it was easy to locate it when we put it back on. If you missed the last video, we're cutting the roof off so that we can cut the cage out, so that we can fix the cage, because the previous owner didn't bother to weld the whole way around the tubes, and that's like really required. So so that was the goal there. Some of you might be like, that seems a little excessive. Well, let me tell you, it's way easier to weld on something outside of the car. So Yep, so should have been through that video. So here's me welding, just completing welds, so many welds that they just missed or couldn't get to because they like welded the main hoop into the car before they bothered to complete all the welds. So lots of incomplete welds, more and more welding, and the nice thing is when it's outside of the car, you can put it where you're comfortable welding. So we can flip it on its side, flip it on its, flip it over. You know, we can basically move this thing around until I'm in a comfortable spot and I can get a real good weld. So lots and lots of welding. And when you're done, you make sure you go over every single weld, make sure they're all 100% complete, and here you are. So the other nice thing about having the cage outside of the vehicle is it's easier to paint. So these top parts would be impossible to get if it were in the vehicle. So we were able to lug this thing outside, paint it, and then bring it back inside. And also, while we had the cage outside of the car, we threw it on the scales and we weighed that too. So 145 pounds. That's what the weight came out to. And that's chromoly cage. So it's actually a pretty heavy cage. These bars here, the X, are not required because these are 1 5/8" for a 750 cert. So, and then there was a couple other bars that weren't required. I forget where exactly. But yeah, needless to say, the cage is up to certification. Should have no issues with it passing. So 145 pounds. Okay, so we cut all that metal that I was talking about earlier, the stainless steel. We cut all that junk out, and this is what we found underneath. Just, I don't know what they were thinking. Like, they had a plasma cutter and they just went insane. And so yeah, we cut all that junk out. This was some of the work that was left over, and then we just started adding, well, Dad started adding metal back in to reinforce it and make it look way better than it was before. And just continuing, reinforced cross member there, welded metal in there. And then we took the wheel tub out of our parts car, the front passenger side wheel tub, and then we molded it into here. And when we were done, it looked like that. So much better than it was. I don't think I need to say that, but while we had the roof off, we actually we made a template for the floor, and we're gonna make one big aluminum sheet, and then we welded these tabs on here so that we can bolt the floor down and have an aluminum floor. Also added some support for the window structure so that that isn't flopping around. But yeah, you can see it's massively improved. So yeah, there it is in all its glory. Yeah, obviously we threw a coat of paint on it, and then while Dad was working on that, I was working on the transmission to engine mount, just to try and make this more rigid so that these two don't flex away from each other. So I made that, and then I also worked on the steering. So we're going to use the original Talon steering rack, but we're going to delete the power steering. So to do that, if you guys didn't know, there is a valve in here, which is kind of how your power steering functions. You know, puts pressure on either side and makes it easier for you to turn left and right. But if you're doing a manual steering conversion, you don't want that extra fluid and junk in there to get in the way while you're trying to turn the car. and just make it more difficult. You don't want to be pumping fluid through lines. You know, some people just loop the lines, but then you're having to, you know, essentially you have a shock absorber on your steering, and it makes it more difficult to turn. So you can just cut that off. It's uses a little C-clip or something, but I just took a grinder, cut it in half, and it came right off. And then I just plugged all of the lines. They were these weird, I don't even know what kind of seat that is, but basically just welded the fitting shut, and then stuck the O-ring back on, threw a coat of paint on it. And then the next thing, the steering rack is slightly different than the Cadillac, but we needed to convert to the Mitsubishi because the Cadillac was at the wrong angle and location for where the steering column comes down and connects to it. So I started to make these, which are essentially just conversion couplings that go to a Heim end. So I made them out of bar stock, just drilled and tapped, you know, right hand, left hand thread, and there's my fancy threads. And then I machined a flat into them so you can throw a wrench onto them, and then here they are equipped. We also obviously we put a bump steer kit onto the car so that we can adjust the height of your tie rod end and minimize your bump steer. So that's how that came out. Then the next step was to put the cage back in the car. This is actually, obviously you can see the floor is still the old floor. We just mocked it up, but this is the only picture I have of it before we started welding. So a lot of the welds were a pain in the butt to get to. You know, you can see how far my head is away from the weld. You know, you gotta have good eyesight for this kind of stuff, and I found out that my helmet was pretty fogged up. You know, it had all kinds of scratches and scrapes on it, so that wasn't helping anything. But yeah, once I put a new lens in it, it was like, holy crap, I can see what I'm doing now. But anyways, so yeah, lots of welds. You know, my arm here on the other side is wrapped around the car. I'm like essentially hugging this back structure, and yeah, a lot of the welds were kind of like that one. So next, once we got all the welds back on, yeah, also another pro tip, Home Depot, they sell a carbide saw blade that's designed for like really thick metal. That stuff rips right through welds. So what we tried to do when we cut this out is we tried to cut through the weld as close to the outer structure as we could so that we could weld it back in, and came out pretty dang good. There's me welding, and then while we were here, we made a parachute mount. We plan to go very fast in this car, and it would be cool to be able to slow down. So we added that guy, gave the engine bay a coat of paint, and there's the cage all installed, nice and happy. And then we added to the cage, we added a rear trunk support. We plan to run the factory rear trunk, hinges, and all that support structure. So we, as you'll see coming up here, we lightened the roof pretty significantly, so we needed to add structure to the cage to allow us to do that. You know, the idea here is we're adding weight with the cage, but we're also losing weight of the all the like the quarters and stuff. You know, we're all losing a couple layers of metal there to try and make up for it, because we don't need it. It's just metal to hold stickers at this point. So while the roof was off, we took the grinder and ground a whole bunch of metal off of it. I think my dad got like 25 pounds off of it. I forget exactly what it was, but and while that was off, we painted it as well. So next was to weld the roof back on. Unfortunately, I didn't take good pictures of the tabs that we use to locate everything. But the idea was we made all our cuts behind where there's trim. So there's a trim piece that goes across here, so we don't have to do any body work. We just paint right over it, and you'll never know the difference. So while Dad was working on welding the roof on, I was working on welding or mounting the seat. So, well, actually Dad did a lot of this work too, but yeah. So this is a junkyard, or not a junkyard, a dirt track flea market purchase. You can see it's pretty battered. I think it was a $5 seat. Perks of going to a bunch of dirt track flea markets. A lot of people think, oh, I don't race dirt track cars. Why do I need to go to a dirt track flea market? There's not going to be anything there that I would want. Well, you're mistaken. They have lots of parts that can be adapted to whatever form of racing you're interested in. So making seat mounts, I actually had a picture earlier by accident, but here's all the seat belt mounts and seats all mounted, and hey, there's me sitting in the car. Starting to mock up the steering column. So next project on the car is bodywork. We hate bodywork. So my dad did all the bodywork. I hate bodywork. He hates bodywork. We all hate bodywork. But you get through it. It sucks. And once you're done, you don't have to do it anymore. It's why many of our cars look like the way they do, because we don't like doing bodywork. So, yeah, so we got through it. Paint on the car. First glimpse of the car in its final form. Really liking the way the look is coming out. Bodywork came out really good. And we also lightened up the doors, painted them. Lots of body work there too. Well, not on the doors so much, but getting all that done. And we're pretty close. Also, we cleaned up the subframe that we modified. So the factory piece had big bosses that came off here and back here and here, and we cut all that off. So this has been modified to made up to the factory Talon mounts. So we cleaned all that up, and then we cleaned up the transmission, cleaned up the mounts, painted the mounts, and then we mated everything together. And we also made this rear mount so that it will transfer more torque into the chassis, and hopefully just, make the whole thing more rigid. And then here's the mounts that I made for the Talon rack on the Cadillac subframe. You can see them there. And then also, while we were working, while Dad was cleaning stuff, I was rebuilding a 5.3, an LS4, and took it all apart, cleaned stuff, gapped the rings, put it back together. Some 706 heads and a decent cam, and here we are. So got all that bolted back together. Then Dad started working on the bodywork for the fenders, painted them up. There's them with the flares. Came out pretty dang good. Very happy with it. And then here is our steering column support. We couldn't use the factory one because it placed the steering column more over towards the side, and we wanted to center up the driver a little bit, just to give yourself a little more room. And then we installed it into the vehicle. So there it is in all its glory. Super happy with the way it came out. And then cleaned and painted all the front suspension bits, and installed them. I'm going to use the factory axles, of course, and then started installing the exhaust. And this is about where we're at right now. So here the car is in its current state. We've started to modify the hood. The plan is to make a bulge in the bonnet, bulge in the hood, a power bulge in the bonnet, as some people say. So we're going to put that in the hood and hopefully cover all this and you won't know the difference. But there the car is as it sits, and bumper's all cleaned and painted. We cut the bottom off of it to minimize drag, and I'm really happy with the way it's coming out. So I'm going to cut the video off there, and that's where we're at. So if you like the pacing on this video, let me know, and if you enjoyed and you want to see more, please like and subscribe. It would really help me out. So I'm going to cut the video off there, and you guys have a good day.